Angela, how are you?
I'm good, Mike. I'm better than I was at the end of 2021. I'm good.
Okay, well, we're not going to just gloss over that. Um,
Yeah, it's a little bit
a
of a
lot of
teaser,
people
I guess.
struggled, at the end of 2021. I think it's been a couple hard couple years, but
Yeah.
um, without too descript, like what was going on?
I went on vacation with my family to Miami, and right there, I think I would say like vacation for me is like not usually where I want to be. I just vastly prefer working than being on vacation. But I was making it okay. I was like surviving, like being away from my work, my research, and then we went snorkeling. We were like off the coast of somewhere south of Miami, and my close to 87-year-old mom nearly drowned. The
Mm,
happy ending, by the way, is that she didn't drown, but between almost drowning and drowning, there was uh, the ER, the ICU, the hospital, and then a few other misadventures. So anyway, all that happened, but by the time January 1st rolled around, like we were approaching like the equilibrium that we had before the vacation and all that. So that's what I mean by I'm feeling great. Relatively, Mike, I'm feeling great.
okay, all right, good. All right, health is in order. Purpose is in order. It sounds like your relationships are healthy, and people are doing okay. So, kind of the big rocks are in place for you.
Yeah, the big rocks are there. And I will tell you, like all life threatening, or, I think there's nothing quite, you know, the same as like watching your own mother possibly have her life ending. But you get to look at your rocks and you get to say like which ones are the big ones and which ones are the little ones. And so I do feel like I have some perspective. There's always a gift in every situation. And the gift is almost always perspective for me.
Well, there's a couple gems that you're dropping. One is a framework of optimism, a framework of hope, a framework of finding what's good. And then you've also got something you said, I'd rather be working than vacationing. So that's interesting as a framework. And then the other that you share is that you might, and it's a hint, and so wave me off if I'm wrong, but this might have been a traumatic experience for you.
We'll start with the end about trauma. So I did have this experience when I was out in the ocean with my mother while she was not breathing and turning blue. And we were literally, I guess we weren't literally in the middle of the ocean. We were far from the boat that was supposed to be keeping an eye on us. We were apparently far enough from anyone's eyesight or earshot that my cries for help, like somebody help, it was like a movie. I was like, somebody help me, like help, help. Like nobody could apparently see or hear us. And in that moment, I think just a tiny part of my brain was like, oh, this is where PTSD comes from. Like just a tiny part of my brain. Most of my brain was like, just trying to figure out what to do. But a tiny part of me was like, this is, yeah. And I have never, Mike, I honestly have to say, I don't think I've ever experienced terror, like that terror in my life. I had been afraid before. I have probably done stupid things where I should have been more afraid. But in that moment, there were, minutes of like sheer terror. And then, dread, following that, because it's like, is she now going to be brain dead? Like, is she going to like make it out of the ER? So there was trauma. I had to Google, this is ridiculous, but I was talking to my therapist. Why was I talking to my therapist? I hadn't talked to my therapist in 10 years, but my daughter said to me, my daughter's 20. She's like, you have to go to therapy. And I was like, I don't want to go to therapy. And she was like, nobody ever wants to go to therapy. And I was like, yeah, that's probably true. So I got in touch with my therapist. I recounted this. She was like, yeah, you never want to see me. And I was like, true. Anyway, I was talking to my therapist because I knew at some intellectual level that one ought to do something like that after. And we did talk about trauma and I guess what's called acute stress disorder. There's like the 30 days after a traumatic event and like, are you experiencing any of these symptoms?
Within 30 is acute stress And then post 30 is where you meet some of the criteria from a timeline
Post-stress,
for PTSD.
right?
Yeah,
PTSD,
right.
post-traumatic. Sorry. Yeah.
That's right.
So anyway, I will tell you this. I think that in the very immediate aftermath, probably had some, like I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating, I was like obsessively, Googling drowning and so forth. But I think the difference for me was, and maybe this is like less relevant to most people, like my mother lived, I was so grateful. I was euphoric. I was shocked. Like that my mother is, from all perspectives, like completely fine. And so I probably would otherwise have, a much, different, like feeling right now. I probably wouldn't be like talking to you. I don't know what I would be doing, but that was like the sequence of things. During this, I do want to say this, like my mom, like I think her first text to me from the hospital when she got her phone and she was able to not so much on oxygen that she said like, I'm an optimist. I was like, this is a funny text to get from my close to 87-year-old not dead mother. Like, I'm an optimist and I'm so glad that we have something to learn. And, I'm fine. And like really looking forward to thinking about what we all learned in this situation. So I don't know if I'm an optimist, but my mom is definitely an optimist.
That's a teacher too. Yeah. So she's a seeker to understand deeper and committed, it sounds like her whole life to grow, even in the face of something that was life altering, potentially at least.
Yeah. And even at 87, right, where, you might think like, are you still eager to grow? Like, apparently.
What a cool role model.
My mom is like the bestest person. I have to say that she is definitely the goodest person. Like, she is a good person, like to her. So, and in these states of compromise, maybe Mike, as a psychologist, especially, you've seen so many people in so many, different kinds of adverse circumstances. I do think there's something like revealing. It's like, it's like your prefrontal cortex might not be on. You're sort of like stripped down to like your basic impulses. And so, and in those states, for example, when my mother was like just coming back to life, right after the CPR, like, she could barely talk. It's like, what she is stripped down to like nothing, is just a good person who was like, her first thoughts was like, is everyone okay? I'm sorry. like, are you okay? And I have to say that like, if I grow up to be half the person, well, I guess I'm already grown up. If I could ever be half the person my mom is, I'd be very proud.
And I love hearing this because you're bringing up another part of it. I'm still not clear if you're out of the acute phase or technically in the post 30, but still
within 30. It's still within 30. Yeah.
And the label of PTSD, and there's criteria. It's life-threatening to yourself or others. Like, it's some sort of event that really will jar a person. But the label isn't quite right. Post-traumatic is right. Stress disorder, I guess, is correct. But really what it does is it forces somebody to reorganize and a lifestyle to avoid being re-traumatized.
So you think that's what really is going on when we talk about? That's
totally what's going on.
That's interesting.
And this is why, so it's avoiding re-traumatization. So,
right.
So what do? We are amazing species, like we are an amazing, I don't want to say machine. That's not it. Like, the ecosystem is beautiful. And when something like that happens, we are supposed to be alerted to it. And so say there was a particular smell or a color or a sound that you heard, and it was even below conscious, that your brain would say, don't get near that again.
Right. Kind of like food poisoning and being like, don't eat that again. Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, so that you can watch that. Like, am I avoiding being on a boat near water, washing my face?
Well, I'll tell you this, like a subsequent text, not one day afterwards, my mom apparently is going to go to Barbados to see my sister. And she's like, I know this sounds crazy, but I think I'm going to go snorkeling. And I was like, really? She was like, oh, but definitely in shallower water, I'll make sure. I'm like, great, just go for it. I will watch myself. I seem to see none of these like avoidant behaviors in her. Yeah, I will watch it. That is a very interesting thing. It's almost like
Yeah.
we learn, but we learn sort of like overlearn, or we learn the wrong lesson, right? But there is something where we're like trying to adapt and learn, but we're sort of like taking the wrong lesson or making the wrong adaptation.
Well, we're from an evolutionary standpoint, we're making the right lesson, which is stay away from the foul smelling something. Stay away from that. It just
turns out not to be necessarily like adaptive in the long, but yes, there's the understandable reaction, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So it's a survival mechanism as opposed to a optimization, and so, yeah, very cool. And you also, like, back to mom, is that when we're going through something heavy, we're stripped down. And then also when we're witnessing something in your role, we're stripped down. So you see, this is why one of the reasons I'm so in love with the life of getting to the frontier, whether that's in an academic or an athletic standpoint, like really pushing to the edges, because when you are on the edge, you 100% know it, because every mechanism in your body is true. And either you have the internal skills to dance on the edge, or you're doing everything you can to get away from it. The two kind of orthogonal extremes there. And so
what happens when we're not on the edge, right? So like what happens when you're not in the middle of the ocean trying to like, tread water and scream for help? Like what happens when you're just living life and you're far away from the frontier?
Well, so in my model, those are the times when we're training, developing, growing, because all humans will be tested. Elite athletes, elite musicians, artists fundamentally organize their day to be tested every day, right? From a physical, from a mental, from an emotional, sometimes a life perspective, spiritual standpoint. Technically, for sure, they fundamentally, that's a key word, they fundamentally organize their life to be tested. Where the rest of us, life is pretty hard and stressful, and it's because we don't have the fundamental commitments in place, and we don't have the fundamental psychological skills to kind of go test. We're just trying to get relief because we're tired and we're struggling with like the big order of things, purpose and whatever. So let's segue right into what I thought we were going to talk about mostly, which is character. So it's been over 5 years, Angela, since you were on the podcast.
No way. I don't believe you. Well, it hasn't been 5 years since we talked, but okay.
No.
5 years since I've been on this podcast. All right.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. I mean, half a decade.
It should be, it's almost embarrassing, isn't it? And so it should be like, we should have a regular segment, like the wisdom from Angela, like it should be a corner staple of what we're doing.
I don't think I have enough things to say.
Yeah, oh, please. So when we were first connected, you were deep in the trenches on grit. And I don't say this lightly, but you are world recognized for passion, perseverance, the organization of living a particular way in an aspirational way. And so, like, awesome. And I know that you've been pivoting and you've been, I don't want to say more interested, but you've been working on character. And let's just talk about the migration from grit to character and why and what's happening for you there.
It's a question to begin with. What is character, right? Like, what is character? We use that phrase a lot. Maybe don't use it enough. I think of character the same way Aristotle, I think, thought of character, which is, character is everything that you do, everything that you think, everything that you feel, and everything that you say that is both good for others and good for you. And to paraphrase Aristotle, I think like a life well lived, right? One thing that this incident with my mother nearly drowning taught me is that my mother will not be around forever. Like, thank God she didn't die on that day, but there will be a day where she is not here. And there will be a day when I am not here. And I think Aristotle, thinking about the finiteness of life, said a life that is well lived is a life that is, done in service to others as well as yourself. And then if you unpack character, right, because it must be that there are more than, one thing, like more than one aspect of like, what does it mean to do that? I think you say, well, obviously it's got to be like being honest, right? Like having integrity, being principled. Well, there's got to be some component in there about humility, knowing that like everything that you know could be wrong, or that somebody else could be right and disagree with you. There's got to be kindness in there, right? Like having a genuine affection for your fellow person. What about generosity? Giving everything. Like, well, the list keeps growing. I think somewhere down the line, maybe like 8 or 9, you say something that looks like grit, right? Like, what about perseverance in the face of setbacks and, pursuing things that have purpose to you? Okay, that sounds like character too. I think of Aristotle when I think of, what I want to be myself. I think of this when I think of my 2 daughters who are now 18 and 20. I guess they were, 5 years younger when last we spoke. And it's really clear to me that character is probably what we should be focusing on. And grit is just one component of it, not one that I want to diminish, because like you, Mike, I think you and I probably personally enjoy high performance and excellence. Like it is a pleasure for us to see someone who is truly at the top of their game, whether it's a game like a sport, or whether they're like a 3-star, Michelin chef, or a great journalist or writer, whatever it is. So I think grit is important, but I think it's a facet of character that as a mother, as a person, as a performer, I wouldn't even necessarily count as the most important aspect of my own character or the people that I admire. So I don't know if it's a pivot, because in a way I have to say at the same time that as a scientist, you have to specialize. It's like, like an athlete, right? Like you can't play all sports equally well. So I do study grit, and I'm continuing to study grit now 5 years after the last time we talked. But I more and more want to like basically get all the researchers and psychologists who study all of these facets of character to come together and say, like, here's the stuff that we know, that's useful. And also just, here's how we can, do more of like this good work. Like, how do we like find out more about these aspects of character?
Okay. I want to take a quick little break here to talk about Apollo Neuro. Apollo Neuro is a stress relief wearable that improves your body's resilience to stress so that you can relax and sleep and focus and recover and just feel better overall. And you wear it on the wrist or the ankle. And what it does is it delivers this gentle, soothing vibration that will help train your nervous system to recover and rebalance after acute stress. And I want to double click on the science here. There was a recent study that I want to highlight that was done at the University of Pittsburgh. They had 38 healthy subjects. And when compared to no intervention, placebo, and wearing Apollo Neuro, they found that 40% less stress and feelings of anxiety in people that wore Apollo Neuro, a 10% increase in HRV. That's a big deal for a nice piece of evidence of better recovery. And they had an average of 18% more time in deep sleep. How about it? So if you're interested in learning more, I would definitely listen to the Finding Mastery episode with their founder, Dr. David Rabin. And when you punch over to check out their product, it's apolloneuro.com/finding mastery. When you use that -finding mastery, you'll get 15% off your purchase. So how do you spell it? Apollo, APOLLO, neuro, NEURO, apolloneuro.com/finding mastery for 15% off your purchase. And Finding Mastery is also brought to you by Athletic Greens. So I started using Athletic Greens because, I don't know, quite simply, I want to be great with my nutrition. And I do struggle making and ordering the right variety of foods to get in the required variety of nutrients. So I've been using AG for 6+ years. And I don't know what to tell you, but I'm stoked on it. I love the energy levels I have on a daily basis, and AG is a part of that equation. It's just 1 scoop in the morning. That's what I do. And in that, I'm absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, adaptogens, all to help, get the day started right. So the special blend of ingredients that they've created are designed to support gut health, nervous system, immune system, energy, recovery, focus, aging, all of those things. And right now, health matters. It's front and center. And so I want to encourage you to invest in your immune system in lots of ways, and Athletic Greens is one of those ways. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you 1 free year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and they're also throwing in 5 free individual packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/finding mastery. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/finding mastery to take ownership of your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. And with that, let's jump right back into the conversation. This idea about it is everything, it encompasses what you do and what you say and what you think, which is another way of saying the human experience. And a big part of my efforts with world class or the aspiring world leading is to help them become aware of their thoughts, words, and actions. From awareness, then we need a North Star, we need a bullseye, we need guardrails, we need first principles. Everything I just said is another way of saying we need some targets about how are we best suited to think, to put words and action into play. What I wanted to talk to you about is that the values, virtues, character conversation is so culturally sensitive, because what my neighborhood values, maybe what my region values, maybe what my country values is very different to other parts of the world. So I do want to get like on the chessboard, if you will, like what are the core characters or character values, or are you calling them character virtues, that are important to you that you're studying? I know Aristotle had like 7 or 9, and fortitude was definitely one of them. I think you would hang your hat on that as what he was referring to as grit. But what are the main ones? And then can you thin slice the difference between character, virtue, and value?
So there are lists of, these, let's call them character strengths, right? But you could call them different things, but like there are lists of them, right? Aristotle, Benjamin Franklin had a list. I think he called them the virtues, 13. Right? 13 of them, right? But then there's also like the 7 heavenly virtues contrasted with the 7 deadly sins. And, there are many lists, right? We haven't even talked about like Eastern traditions, right? So like there are lots of lists, but in about 2000 or so, like right around the turn of the millennium, there were 2 psychologists named Marty Seligman and Chris Peterson. Marty Seligman ended up being my PhD advisor a couple of years after this, but they decided to come up with the Encyclopedia of Character. And they took all the lists that they could find in history across religious and philosophical traditions, and they looked at what the lists had in common, right? Because obviously there are little differences, like, oh, this list doesn't have humor on it, but this one does. Like, look, I found temperance on these 4 lists, or close synonyms. And what they concluded is that though there are some differences across history and across culture, there are striking commonalities. And so they came up with a list of 24 strengths. And they have things on there like appreciation of beauty, curiosity, humility, perseverance, things that, again, if you had a blank piece of paper and you just had to list things, like you probably would get close to the list that they came up with. 24 is a lot, Mike. I honestly couldn't name all 24. If this were a final exam, I'm sure I wouldn't get 100%. It was like, okay, wait a second. All right, that's up to 22. Like, I don't know. So I think it might be simpler to think of the categories of these places. Like, are there families? So that is there a smaller number than 24? So there's been a lot of scientific research asking the question, like, are there kind of like natural bundles of character strengths that kind of like go together and are all like kind of pointing to the same thing? And I believe that there are really 3 natural families of character strengths. And I'm going to call them heart, mind, and will. Because like you, Mike, I think having a language for this that like is a little bit memorable and, feels right is important. So let's start with heart. So these are interpersonal character strengths like generosity and kindness, like empathy and compassion, like honesty, because if you're honest, it affects some other person. And if you're dishonest, it also affects other people. These are all character strengths, which I would argue are the most important character strengths. Your strengths of heart are the ones where if you don't have them, it very clearly other people than you suffer. And I think when you talk to someone about someone else, like if I say, hey, Mike, I want you to meet this high performer, first thing I want to tell you about, they have great character. You probably would spontaneously think of these interpersonal strengths of heart. That's actually, by the way, not what I study. And this is why I want to be humble about what I study. I mean, it's not like I study the most important dimension of character. It's all these other people who study this most important dimension. And I do want to say, when I say this is a natural family, it's like people who are generous tend to be grateful. People who are grateful tend to be honest. People who are honest tend to be like, so when I say it's a family, it's like when you have certain of these character strengths, you tend to have the other ones. And I do think it's all about an orientation toward like other people matter at the heart of all of these, at the heart of all these strengths of heart. So that's one of these families. The second family that I don't find it too difficult to remember is strengths of mind. And I think it's important to say that whether you're an athlete or, one of the things that just shocked me when I got to hang out just a little bit with professional athletes, which I know you've done a lot of work with in your life, it's like how smart they are. I was like, oh, I didn't know you were going to be really curious, intelligent, analytic, creative. So I will say of athletes and non-athletes, these strengths are like curiosity, humility of, especially intellectual humility, imagination, creativity. And these strengths, I want to tell you that like I've been doing research about labor trends, at least in the United States. And when you look at a lot of data and you ask what jobs in this country are paying more and as a trend over the last 15 years are paying more and more. In other words, from a practical standpoint, the labor market is rewarding these jobs. They tend to be jobs that really actually have this like intellectual dimension. It turns out that machines and algorithms are increasingly replacing, the rote tasks, whether they were manual tasks or more like, problem solving tasks, like anything that's kind of standard. An algorithm can do it better than you can. And by the way, the algorithm works 24/7 and doesn't make any mistakes. So this strength of mind category, I think, is increasingly important because it is uniquely human to be a creative problem solver. It is uniquely human to have curiosity about unrelated things. It is uniquely human to like have these particular strengths of mind. Artificial intelligence will not beat out, I think, human intelligence, like in this particular, kind of like in the way that these strengths describe. So that's what I mean by strengths of mind. And then the last thing is what I do study, strengths of will. I study self-control and grit, and I study optimism and growth mindset and proactivity. And I think all of these strengths are important for getting things done, right? And I think as somebody who, started out as a teacher who saw a lot of kids who were failing, and they were failing out of school, they were failing my tests as a math teacher, they were not on trajectories where they were going to, do well in life. I think a lot of my attention went to strengths of will because they were not doing what they could have done. But when I say that it may be the least important family of character, it's just like, I just think of my own daughters, if they were honest and good people and they were really curious and learners, but, they didn't get a lot done. I mean, I would certainly take that as a trade-off, versus having them be like really gritty, people with no heart, or, really gritty people who were very closed-minded. So strengths of heart, strengths of mind, strengths of will. And that's my description of them. And there's a lot of, research to suggest that like, yeah, those are, three defensible ways of thinking about like a complete, roster of character.
So super clear. I love that you've found which ones hang together. You've bundled in a way that I can easily remember as well. Heart, mind, and will. And I want to tell you an exercise I did when my son was first born that I think it's been a meaningful exercise for my wife and I, is that unsophisticated, but intentional. She wrote down a list of a bunch of, come to think about it, as character strengths, character values. I still need to get the definition from you.
Oh yeah, I haven't answered that one. Yeah.
Yeah. But so she wrote it on a page and I wrote on a page. And then we said, okay, let's boil them down. And then we each got to 3. And what we wanted, this exercise was to try to help clarify what are the strengths that we want to be able to pass on and cultivate in our son.
What were
and
they?
we knew that. So I'll tell you. So we got down to 2. And so one of them actually, one of them, but this has been a guidepost to help us think about our thoughts, our words, and our actions towards our son, the environment that we're creating. And I want to play a game. I wonder if I could guess, knowing you and knowing what matters to you, I wonder if I could guess what 3 you would pick, or 2 or 3 you would pick
for my kids. For my own children.
For your kids, yeah. So mine was kindness and strength. And so strength is really about courage and to do the hard thing, the fortitude to stay with it when it's hard. Yeah, right. And so that's where strength comes. And then kindness is exactly what it sounds like, right? And so those are the 2 that guide us. And so anyways, I didn't have a third category. I didn't have the buckets that you had.
That's good though. Kindness and strength. It's even better. Well, you didn't. So what you didn't mention, right? Like, so you didn't mention curiosity or, love of learning, et cetera. Right?
Like, it was on the list.
It was on the list, but you had to prioritize.
List. Yeah, we're like, okay, let's focus on 2. And maybe what we do now is we open it up and focus on a third one, because by the age of 13, he's got those 2 pretty well grooved. We've been pretty relentless with it, but now we maybe open up another 2 or whatever. But can I guess what I think yours?
Yeah, this is great. Go for it. I wrote. I know what I think I know what I think. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so for heart, will is easy, right? Shouldn't that be one easy for you, that you're going to teach grit?
Yeah, and I have to say, like, yeah, if we teach by example, then they see a lot of grit, and I would be lying if it weren't, it's a value.
And so strength of mind, I think you leaked it when you said, oh, you didn't have curiosity. So, and I know you to be really curious and to be intellectually curious, and, to be like, well, where does that come from? And how does that work? So I would imagine curiosity.
Yeah, that's good. I'm going to give you a point for that one too. So 2 out of 2.
Okay. And heart.
Yeah. Which one do you think I picked for heart?
Give me 3 and I bet I could get the 1.
Okay. You said kindness. I'm just going to, I don't know exactly how you mean kindness, but I'll use that synonymous with generosity. There's gratitude. And in strengths of heart, I would also count like honesty. So you could call it, generosity, gratitude, honesty. Which of those do you think?
I think we're like-minded in this way. I'm going to go with kindness.
Yeah, you got it. Oh my gosh, Mike, you know me so well. I would have said that, but I actually literally wrote it down just to keep myself, just keeping the score here. Like I would have been honest in my reporting, but yeah. And if I had to rank order ours, right? Like which of those is most important? I mean, I think for me, probably, kindness, it was really important to me. I actually worried once my older daughter was like, I had made banana bread for her like preschool teachers or something. And we were like packing it up and she was like, no, I want to keep this. And I was like, no, this is for your teachers. She's like, but I don't want to give the banana bread to the teachers. I want to keep it. And it was like, oh no, my daughter is going to grow up to be an unkind person. But yeah, no, I have to say that what I'm most proud of, I think, is that my daughters really are like kind, spontaneously, I think authentically, wanting to take care of their friends and make a small positive dent in the universe. There is something, though, I have to say, of late, I have recognized as being really important. So it wasn't spontaneously what I wrote down myself or thought about, but I do think more and more that honesty is really important. And we haven't talked about my husband, but my husband really, of the two of us, I think, is the better parent. And thinking about honesty, the pandemic has been hard, and the pandemic there's research on this, when people are in a stressed state, it's easier to cut corners. It's easier to justify, a little cheating here, a little fib there. With my daughters, who are now kind of like 18 and 20, I mean, they're like young adults, right? They're like not in our house anymore, at least, right? They're not like, just what they see happening. And like, I was like, you wouldn't cheat, right? Like, and they were like, Mom, like nobody who's a daughter of Jason would ever cheat. And I was like, yeah, that's true. So I have
But they didn't
lately
say
come to,
a daughter
they didn't say me, by
of
the
Angela.
way.
Yeah.
I know they didn't. They're like a
Oh,
daughter
God.
of, I was waiting for it. It's like, yeah, but I already knew. I was like, yeah, Jason. Yeah, my husband is as square as they could be, as a human being could be. So anyway, I think these character strengths, are guideposts. Like they are things that like parents to be or parents who are, or like any of us are like, what do I want to do in 2022? I mean, what better way to set a New Year's resolution? Rather than like, I want to lose 5 pounds. I want to like, what about your values? Like the ones that you want to say at the end of the year, like I lived that life, right? Aristotle said that character is life well lived. Like that was the year 2022 that I lived. And I'm going to answer your question now about values versus character. So when I said that, around the turn of the millennium, right around 2000, that these two psychologists, Chris Peterson and Marty Seligman, decided to come up with the Encyclopedia of Character. And there's literally a chapter for each of the character strengths, right? There are 24. They decided on the title for the book to be Values in Action. And their definition of character is the values that you hold dear. So the principles that you hold to be, more important, the aspirational principles that you would like to say that you live your life by. Maybe you don't, maybe you haven't yet, but these are the things you believe to be the most important. So of higher priority than other things. These are your values, but values in action is character. So if you really think honesty is important, but you don't enact honesty, then you can value honesty, but you do not have the character strength of honesty. So I thought that was a very carefully chosen and apt title for this Encyclopedia of Character. And I think it's a good way of us to think about character because it is not just aspirational. It is also, only enacted. You can only have character by enacting character.
Okay, I want to take a quick little break here to talk about HIA. So typical children's vitamins are basically candy in disguise. They're filled with teaspoons of sugar, chemicals that you do not want your kids ingesting. This is why HIA was created. The pediatrician approved superpowered chewable vitamin. HIA is made from a blend of 12 farm fresh fruits and vegetables and then supercharged with 15 essential vitamins and minerals known to help support a healthy immune system, energy levels, brain function, mood, teeth, bones, and more, of course. It's non-GMO, vegan, dairy-free, allergy-free, gelatin-free, nut-free, and everything else that you can imagine. They've really been thoughtful about it. HIA is designed for kids of all ages and then sent right to your door. My 13-year-old son, he loves it. It's his go-to. And what I love about it is that I know that what he's consuming has been thoughtfully designed by people that think like me, like they want their best for their kids. And the way that they're designing this, your first month comes with a reusable glass bottle. So they're thinking about the environment too. And then they've even made it fun where your kids can personalize it with stickers. So my son's got his initials on his. And then every month thereafter, HIA sends a no plastic refill pouch with fresh vitamins. To grab this deal, go to hiyahealth.com/finding mastery or enter the code finding mastery at checkout. So it's HIA Health, spelled HIYA, HIA Health, hiyahealth.com/finding mastery to get your kids full body nourishment they need to grow into healthy adults. Full discount is applied at checkout. And Finding Mastery is brought to you by Optimizers. Now, stress is not bad. We need stress to grow. It's chronic stress that creates challenges in health. Those chronic stresses take a toll on our body and specifically deplete your magnesium levels. This deficiency of magnesium can lead to higher levels of anxiety and irritability and trouble sleeping, low energy. It can even contribute to foot and leg cramps while you sleep. I personally take magnesium every day. It's made a massive difference on sleep for me. And it's also been shown in general to help with energy levels, blood pressure, irritability, depression, stronger bones, muscle cramping, migraines. But to experience these health benefits, you've got to get the right types of magnesium. There are actually 7 unique forms of magnesium, and you got to get them all in to get this thing right. And that's why I recommend Magnesium Breakthrough by Optimizers. All you need is a couple capsules before you go to bed, and I think you'll be amazed by the improvements in mood and energy, sleep, and just basically how much more rested you feel when you wake up. So for an exclusive offer, go to magbreakthrough.com/finding mastery and use the code finding mastery during checkout to save 10% and get free shipping. So how do you spell it? It's mag, M-A-G, breakthrough, BREAKTHROUGH, magbreakthrough.com/finding mastery. And now let's jump right back into the conversation. Two parts to that. One is we put values in action in our online course. And it's a
use the VIA.
Yeah. And
Great.
So it's
Good
a resource that people can go in there and just figure out, like
they get their scores, right? They get their signature strengths. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So it's from that standpoint, it's great. And then on the honesty bit, I think that honesty, this is personal, right? Like I don't have data, so I'm not speaking from a data mind here, but for me, honesty, of course it's a value, but to do so when it's hard to do so requires courage. And so that's why I laddered back to strength.
Yeah, I was going to say, why did you say strength? And what do you mean by courage? What is courage for you then? What is that?
Courage is like doing the noble thing when it's hard to do it, and having the courage to, in modern times, like what I'm teaching him, is to know who he is, to know his core values, and to live authentically that even when it's hard to do so. And so it's courage to speak. It's courage to truth, maybe courage to act.
So that term that you've chosen, courage, is that because the enemy is fear? Is that what makes it difficult? Is that you have to overcome fear to tell the truth or to do the right thing?
Yeah, I think we are struggling professionally with, and not just our profession, but leadership in general. I think courage is something that is hard for people to do.
Can you have courage and also have compassion? So on Thursday nights, I've been teaching this class of high school students. So it's kind of like finding mastery type stuff, but for high school students. And we were actually talking about generosity and paying it forward. So these high school students are giving examples of, being nice. It's like taking care of your best friend, helping with the dishes. More than one of them says trading homework. And I was like, trading homework? Like you're not allowed to trade homework. It's a euphemism for cheating. And then they were like, explaining these circumstances, but also they were like, this is a really hard year. This is really we're exhausted. We are tired. And and I was like, you know what? It is exactly when you are tired, exactly when you're exhausted, is exactly when you are stressed that I think it becomes more important to remind yourself, what is the right thing to do? And, I guess under certain very narrow circumstances, trading homework would be okay. Under many circumstances, that's called cheating and it's not okay. So I think it's interesting. And there is research on this that, when people are feeling stressed out, they are more likely to endorse cheating and to cheat. So I do think that this idea of courage, I don't know if it's fear or but I did want to unpack that a little bit. What is the enemy to be overcome? Is it fear or is it fatigue?
It's interesting. I never thought about it in terms of enemies, but it would be fear and fatigue are two of the culprits to potential. Because when we are fatigued and we're deeply afraid of something, it's like it puts this heavy blanket on passion. It puts this heavy blanket on being agile to adjust to the unfolding, unpredictable world around us. And so fear and fatigue, if you're going to call them enemies, those are the ones that I am relentlessly working with people and businesses to help them have tools and perspectives and practices to be able to work with that, to go upstream to fear, to go upstream to fatigue and get the practices right so that we're not chronic in both. And courage is I think it's, I don't know this to be true, but I think it's got to be, at least for me, the key pin, where it's a lot starts here with courage.
And you think of it as a skill?
Yeah, it's courage. I can practice courage.
I think that's another aspect of, so let's say character includes grit, but it includes courage and includes generosity, includes all these things. I think one other difference between a value And a character strength is a value in action. So you can practice it and you can watch somebody else do it and be like, oh, like that. I mean, there's like actually strategies, right? I've read this like tiny little book on creativity, which is not something we've been talking about, but it would be a strength of mind, right? And it was by John Cleese. I think he's like one of the Monty Python guys. It's like as slim as your pinky, but it's one of those books where you pick it up in a bookstore and like you sort of feel guilty because by the time you want to buy it, you've like literally read the whole thing. Yeah. I did buy it, by the way. But anyway, like it was a really interesting perspective on creativity. It was like creativity is a decision, it's a choice, it's a skill, it's a strategy. It's not just something, it's not just a gift, right? So I love this language about character as being, something you can practice, something you can get, better at, something that you could like read about and like get better at it just because you read about how somebody else is doing it. So I think those are some of the reasons that it's different from values.
Let's talk about just creativity for just a thread here, is that I think it requires courage to be creative, to say or to see or to express something differently. And if creativity it was new to me, and innovation, it's new to others, I still think it comes back to some courage to be able to explore the new to me, and certainly to explore the new to others, the innovation part. So again, I'm laddering back to courage. That being said, I want to make sure I'm hearing what you're saying correctly, is that character and virtues and values. So can you summarize those quickly as just like bang, bang, bang?
So virtues, I think, and character strengths are basically synonyms. Like, okay. I think virtues just sound so, I don't know. Some people love the language of virtues, but other people, it sounds a little bit like somebody's wagging a finger at you, like with a very like high lace collar on or something. Like, so I'm just going to pass on the virtue definition because I think of it as the same thing, maybe a highfalutin word or something. But character and values, I think, has that distinction. Character is like all the things that you habitually do, think, say, and feel that are good for others and good for you. So your character should be, I hope, like a work in progress your whole life. Not just like Mike's kind or Mike's not kind, but like Mike is getting kinder. Mike is already kind, but working on kindness in 2022. So that's to me what character is. These like ways of thinking, acting, feeling, and doing that or saying, I guess, that benefit others and yourself, that you can continue to cultivate your whole life, but they really are in action. So they're not just sort of like thoughts you have. They're not just beliefs. They're enacted. And then values, I do think, are like the aspirational principles by which you would hope to live your life, right? I mean, you really can't value kindness and not be kind, but you cannot have the strength of kindness or the character strength of kindness or the virtue of kindness without actually doing kind acts.
Very cool. Now let's get into the applied part of this. How do you help people develop their character? Do you say, first know your natural strengths and then pick 2 or 3 that you want to get better at and practice and train those? Or like how do
what's the roadmap? Like, how do you do this? I do think, and I think we share this, but you tell me if I'm wrong. I do think that number one, before all, there is self-awareness. As my own therapist will tell me, like, your homework is to notice, like how you're feeling this week, like just to notice. So I think noticing your strengths, noticing your weaknesses, I think that is the very first step to any kind of growth. Do you agree with that, Mike?
Step 1 is I don't go strengths and weaknesses. I'll go developed, still developing. Right?
That's better. That's better. Yeah, that's better. Yeah, that's better language.
But I can get around weakness. It's like when you put somebody in a stress test and they lie. Well, there's a weakness.
I like your language, but like I think where we're agreeing is that there's this kind of like self-awareness, right? Like, and you could ask other people.
It all begins with awareness.
It always begins with awareness, and you kind of can't go very far without it. So it's like necessary but not sufficient. I think it's you've gone a long way when you have like some self-awareness. So in terms of,
So wait, hold on. Because you're saying something, we are more aligned here than maybe you might have thought, but I have had some, I don't want to say scar tissue, but like I've had some arrows in my back because for years I've been saying, listen, there's 3 practices that I'm aware of to increase awareness: mindfulness, call it meditation, journaling, and conversations with people of wisdom. And so all of that is to notice more, to become more. Those 3 practices will help people become more aware. And I've said very publicly is that mindfulness is not alone.
Oh, I totally agree. I think mindfulness is one route.
Oh,
I mean, like journaling, you're right. Like, so there is some magical thing with language. Like, I don't know where the human species would be without language, but like there is something reflective that we can do while we're writing. The very word essay means to try in French. And there is this theory, like when you're writing, it's like you're right. My mother used to say to me when I was a little girl, it's like when you're writing, you're thinking, and when you're thinking, you're writing. So I think journaling, this thing about conversation, I mean, I don't know how expansive your thought is, but I absolutely think there is, when I teach a course at my university and I say like, where does growth come from? I say like, you are all going to write in this course. Every week, you're going to have a weekly reflection. And that's part of it. I don't assign mindfulness or meditation, but we like dabble a little bit in that. But the other thing that I think is very important is conversation. I don't know how expansive you are. I don't know if you mean like conversation with like great thinkers through reading. I really literally mean conversation. I mean like this conversation. I mean like if you want to become more self-aware, it's not only that you talk to Mike about your like principles of finding mastery, but also like you talk to your sister about like what she sees in you as your superpowers. I think there's so much. I think human beings were like, designed, as it were, like we have evolved to learn about ourselves through conversations with people that we love.
Yeah, you and I are completely aligned there. And then can we slightly pivot towards developing practices to develop resilient, high character kids? And I just mixed 2 things together, but
let's say that resilience is a facet of character, right? It's like something that's good for you and good for others. It's like you can practice it, you can value so I think resilience in particular, because let's just talk about that in particular. I think I have wondered, there are these stories of people who everybody else gives up and they don't. And for me, I'm always wondering, why didn't the person give up? Like what was going on in their head? And the best answer that I can give you today is that they don't think it's hopeless. Okay, why? I think that resilience comes from a history of wins. I really do. Like, I think it comes from, I tried and it worked. Like, I tried again and it worked. I tried again and it worked. Now, of course, it probably also comes from I tried and it didn't work. Like, but I read this study of Outward Bound, which is a leadership program that I know about. Maybe not everyone does. Like, they take you out to the wilderness, and it can be for a day. It's often for weeks, and it's very, very difficult. It's also something that, like, at times you might even fear for your life, even though it's actually strictly not dangerous. And Outward Bound has these amazing long-term effects, at least in some research studies. Like 2 years later, people are more self-confident. They have more self-awareness. They are better working in teams and so forth. So I read this study that said, like, okay, let's ask people who have gone on Outward Bound, like, from this laundry list of things that it could have been that helped them. Like, what about it? Was it being outdoors? Was it like, these conversations? Like, the number one thing and the last thing on this list of like, what helped you? The number one thing was learning from overcoming things successfully. The bottom thing, the thing they said they learned the least from, was failing, but not having it resolve in success. So I think that resilience, I know we want to teach our children to learn how to fail. And of course, that is at the heart of it. But I think the paradox there is that what builds their confidence is striving and seeing that they have agency, like trying and then finding that it did work out. So I think as a parent, I have, tried to make sure that my daughters experience struggle, and that if they fail, they fail, and that it's nothing to fear because they go through it. But I also really think that people have to have small wins. Otherwise, where does the confidence come from? Why should they hope that they can do something if they have never been taught through experience that that's true?
What's your favorite question to ask your kids or kids in general?
What's my favorite question to ask kids in general? Well, there's a form of question. I really like to ask my daughters, Lucy and Amanda, like about people they really admire. Like if they have a friend, that they're spending a lot of time with, like why, like what do they admire in them? I guess it's a way of asking, like, well, in a way, I guess it could be anything, right? They could admire that like Hannah has really great hair or something, right? Or like, Joanna is really good at math or something, but they tend, interestingly, spontaneously, to talk about character, like, who's kind, like who's principled, like who's selfless, like who's brave. So I like to ask people, actually, I like to ask all people about when I started doing research on grit, the best way to find out about, what makes somebody successful is not to ask them about themselves, because, we edit, we like, self-deprecate, but to ask people about the people they most admire. Like go ask a Nobel Prize winning economist whom they most admire and why, and you will have a very long and rich conversation that reveals a lot about, what that person sees and what they value themselves.
One of my favorite questions to guess in these conversations is to say, if you had a chance to sit with one true master, who would it be? Where would it be? And if you only had one question, what would it be? But it starts with who. And so can I ask you, like, if you could sit with one true master, who would that be?
Okay, I'm going to give you the first person that leaps to mind, but there's, of course, a long list. But there was a guy, now long dead, named Benjamin Bloom. You probably know who this psychologist was. He was at University of Chicago. He actually, Finding Mastery, like arguably was like the architect of just this whole idea that learning should be mastery oriented, right? That you shouldn't go on to the next thing until you get the last thing. But he did this study called Developing Talent in Young People, where he followed 120 high performers. He didn't really follow them. He actually interviewed them like when they were already accomplished, and some of them were in retirement. But I unearthed this interview that he had done, decades ago now, right? Because this is all well in the, rear view mirror for history. And he just seemed like the kindest person who basically spent his whole life trying to identify, what are the foundational skills for mastery. And like the thing in this interview that just struck me and did make me want to like resurrect him from the dead so that I could have dinner with him and learn from him was he was like, I truly believe, he's like, I'm not saying that everybody could be anything, but I truly believe that there is just enormous untapped potential in all human beings. And if we could identify the conditions to bring that out, like then, we would really have like a world worth living in. And I was like, Benjamin Bloom, come back from the dead.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah, that's really good. We're up on in the hour here, but I just want to ask a couple more questions about character gone wrong or not fully developed. Like most people I know are saying, oh man, this is awesome. Yeah. Oh yeah, that I do that too. And I want that for my children. And I want that for me too. But I know lots of people that are jealous. They lead with envy. They like to tear people down as a default. They lack moral courage in so many ways. So and they came from good parents, character is not just aspirational. There's bad character too, if we're going to use good and bad. So can you just talk a little bit about that piece too?
Well, look, confession. So I'm on the boat and my mom is there and I don't know whether she's going to live and she's barely breathing. She barely has a pulse. And I was, of course, praying to God. What else do you do, right? I was praying to God. I was like, I don't even pray, but like, God, if there's a God, like let my mother live. And this is what I promised God. And I don't know why I did. It was like, I won't be jealous anymore. I was like, after I got off the boat, I'm like, what the hell is that?
Yeah, there you go.
Who am I jealous of? Happily married, pretty successful. What? So anyway, I don't know. We'll have to unpack that in many subsequent therapy sessions. But I do think there's two kinds of bad character. There's the bad character you have, And there's the bad character you don't even know you have. And that's probably, talking about self-awareness, like the one you really have to worry about, right? Like I have known for a very long time, Mike, and it hasn't come out in our interactions, but I really do have like a terrible temper. I'm like one of those volcanoes that only erupts once every few years. But like when I do, it's like, get out of the way because people are going to melt. Right. So I have a terrible temper, and that is something to work on. And I have worked on it very deliberately because of self-awareness. I'm like, oh, I know I have a terrible temper. Like when things are not right, if somebody who works for me doesn't do something to my standard of excellence, like don't lose your temper. Like it's terrible. But then there are the limitations of my character that I have no conscious awareness of. Like, where the hell did the jealousy come out of? Like, what part of my deep subconscious is obviously obsessing about what other people have that I don't, that is somewhere there, like smoldering. So I guess I think of bad character in those two ways. And I think that maybe the people in my life who have shown me aspects of my bad character that I was really unaware of are like actually my own children, I remember like calling down to the hotel front desk from a vacation one, like I was like just indignant that our expensive hotel room hadn't been made up in like 3 days since and I call down every day and I hang up the phone and my both daughters are in chorus are like, you are incredibly unkind. And I was like, that's not true. I'm the head of character lab. And they're like, you were just mean. And I was like, I wasn't mean. Look at this. Like, they're like, yes, you were. And there's a poor human being who has no control over the housekeeping services in this understaffed hotel. And you, rich woman, are being mean. You're unkind. And I was like, you know what? Facts. Like I had, it took me a while, by the way. I'm not a saint. I was just like, I'm defensive. After a few days, I was like, you know what? That is a limitation of my character that I was completely unable to see, was in my blind spot. So if you have children in your life, God bless you, because they will point out your character limitations. But you have anybody in your life, I think these are good questions to ask. Like, what do you see as my superpowers? And what are some, what did you say, like developing strengths? Mm-hmm. Like whatever language you want to use. But anyway, I think of bad character in that way. I really worry about what I don't know.
So you're saying, listen, the anecdote for that, people that have behavioral patterns, character, or lack of virtues and values, that really what's taking place is they're either unaware or they don't care. And there are people that, there's a saying, what is it? Nice guys finish last. Nice people finish last.
Yeah.
So, I think there's some truth to that. I think it's much harder to do the thing excellently and to also have character virtues or, aspirational character in place.
Yeah. I think that's why like aspirational values and character and having a self-concept of somebody who's trying. Like I know that old people always use hashtags wrong, or so I'm told by young people. They're like, whenever you're using a hashtag or the word TikTok, you're wrong. Like just stop trying to. But anyway, sometimes I sign my emails like hashtag work in progress because I know I screwed up, or like I don't like. I really do think having, whatever way you want to put it, like just having a self-concept of somebody who is developing, right? Somebody who's aspiring, somebody who's like not perfect but trying. Like I am definitely not perfect, but I have to say there aren't many days that go by where I'm not trying.
Yeah. Like there's a phrase my wife passes on to me, which is like, hey, we're all just trying to figure it out. It's like so super refreshing. Like just that. Yeah. It's like a breath of fresh.
It's got like sort of, layer. It sounds kind of like a glib thing to say. It's pretty deep actually.
Yeah. It's actually pretty deep.
It's pretty deep.
Okay. We know you. Right? Like you are transparent in a way, in a manner of strength. And so what is exciting you for next? What are you seeing? Because you're amazing in your ability to be introspective, go into the laboratory, put those two together, and then create. So what are you on to next?
So one of the things that I've really been, I don't know, excited or just like frustrated by is that like in a lot of things that I've done as a researcher, I can help people learn how to set goals or make plans and make these tiny little differences in their lives, which disappear in a few months. And I was like, why doesn't this stick? You know what I mean? It's like kind of like watching the first snow of the winter and you're like, God, well, at least in the part of the country where I live, it's like, why isn't it sticking? Like, why isn't it accumulating? And I think, something that you're onto as well, Mike, I think that like building like a deep, like metacognitive foundation, like basically, I think my whole life's work really might be adding up to like increase psychological literacy, right? And just like nobody can learn French or calculus in a day and like expect to have like a 20-minute intervention. And it's like, oh, now I know how to play tennis. Like now I know calculus. Like I think this kind of psychological literacy, which to me is how I think of you, right? Somebody who's like helping us all become a little more psychologically literate, self-aware about ourselves, understand others, understand like these principles that are at work. Like to me, that's what I'm excited about next. So not like 20-minute interventions or little nudges here, but really like helping to make us all a little psychologically wiser, self included. And I know it doesn't solve all the world's problems, but imagine a place where our political leaders, our industry leaders, our classroom teachers, our like neighborhood cops, like our whatever, like we're really just psychologically wise. They understood emotion. They understood, when people are insecure, what happens to us when we do things out of fear, like, how do we build these things? Like, I don't know. It's a pretty great world. So I think that's where I'm hoping to go.
I want to do that with you. Whatever way. Yes.
Team.
Yes, I want
Teamwork
to do
makes
that
the dream work. Let's do it.
Yeah, that is awesome. Okay, listen, Angela, thank you. And where can people plug in, connect, learn from you? What's the best resource?
So I am on social media, including Twitter, but I would love people to visit Character Lab, characterlab.org. We started with character, we'll end with character, Mike, and it's a nonprofit. So everything on there is actionable advice based on psychological science and free because it's supported philanthropically.
And I want to loop it right back around to say, how did the event in the boat or in the water, how did the event in the water change your character?
I don't know that like I've become any better of a person, in the short course of, a few harrowing days and weeks. But I will say this, I really want to be a better person. I was like, oh, turns out life is definitely finite. And there was a blessing. And so I get a little more time with my mom, and I guess I have some time myself, but like, you know what, there will be a day where my mom's not here and I'm not here. And like, because life is short, I hope that I can, be a work in progress a little more intentionally, than I was, maybe like not really as consciously aware of, the finiteness of life.
Every year I do a thing in our whole community. It's the year of, and we pick one or two words. Like, what are you really going to commit yourself to? And so for me, this is the year of play. I run I'm intense, and so like I want to play more. So could you give me one way to practice play?
I heard this definition of a play. It's the voluntary overcoming of unnecessary obstacles. And it never left me. And that's not my definition. I heard somebody else say it, like Jane McGonigal or something, right? Like the voluntary overcoming of unnecessary obstacles. And it made me think that what work is sometimes the feeling of an involuntary overcoming of necessary obstacles. And I think blessed are us who can blur that distinction, because it's like, what you're doing as your work, like other people would, like watch you and feel like, it's play. And I think it's just that, like, if in 2022 we can find ways to do things that feel more voluntary, like maybe they need to get done, but like we feel like we have the choice and that we've made it. And then to consider these obstacles as, like when you have something that's really difficult in your life and it's really like hard, and like if you could actually have a play mindset, right? Like what is how thin can we make that line between the involuntary overcoming of necessary obstacles and the voluntary overcoming of unnecessary obstacles? I think the people that I admire most, the line is very thin indeed.
Epic framework and reframe. Angela, you are the best. Thank you for your time and your graciousness. And I really appreciate our friendship. So thank you.
Mike, thank you so much. To be continued.